Hello everybody, my name is Thomas Edgell and I'm joined here with John Quinn. And we are here to talk about an introduction to your first ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. So before we start, I wanted to do a little poll of our audience here. So of everybody in this room, who is familiar with installing or configuring ArcGIS Enterprise already? Okay, decent show of hands here. How about ArcGIS Server? If you just worked with ArcGIS Server in the past? Awesome, okay. And then lastly, how about ArcGIS Online? Do we have any ArcGIS Online administrators here? Okay, awesome. Looks like a lot of people kind of fill the same role of server and online administration. So there might be some familiarity with what you see here. And we hope that's a good thing, that you can be familiar with everything about ArcGIS Enterprise. But yeah, we're here to give an introduction. If ArcGIS Enterprise is not something that you're aware of, or if you just want a refresher, hopefully this will help out. And if you have any questions, please feel free to come up and talk to us at the end of the session. We'll have some time for questions. And if anybody can't see anything on the screen, we're going to do some demos. Just let us know. We can zoom in or whatnot. But to start, for our overview here, we're going to start and just explore what Esri's Web GIS options are. Then we're going to talk about building your base ArcGIS Enterprise deployment, which is going to consist of an overview of what the base ArcGIS Enterprise deployment is, and then some of the key concepts that you should know about installing and configuring it. Next, we're going to do a deep dive into the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder. We're going to talk about the installation and configuration of that and do some demos. Then we're going to talk about what's new at ArcGIS Enterprise 10.6 in relation to the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder, showing the upgrade and command line tools that are implemented there. And next, we're going to wrap up with some quick tips that you can take away from this session when you're using ArcGIS Enterprise, specifically the Builder. So to get started here, Esri has two different Web GIS offerings here, ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. Regardless of which one you choose, you're still going to get core Web GIS functionality, which is the ability to create apps, use some of our smart visualization, smart mapping, analysis tools, all within your web browser. But we do have two different ways of delivering it. If you're using ArcGIS Online, what you're doing is you're using our software as a service offering. This is something which is hosted by Esri in the cloud. We handle all the upgrades and we upgrade pretty frequently, and we also control the licensing of that. Now with ArcGIS Enterprise, this is the option if you wanted to get that same experience but inside of your own infrastructure, just software. So if you're using that, you have to be mindful because you're the one in charge of doing all of the upgrades manually, and you control your licensing and can distribute licenses as you need. So ArcGIS Enterprise, even though it's in your own infrastructure, it can be installed on physical machines, virtual machines, or on cloud environments like Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services. For this presentation though, we're going to be focusing on ArcGIS Enterprise, and we'll be referring to the base ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. So some of you might be wondering, what is the base ArcGIS Enterprise deployment? And what that is 4 different software components which were all available in previous releases. So you're probably familiar with some of these product names here, but now they're bundled together to form ArcGIS Enterprise. So to start, let's look at the web adapter. The ArcGIS Web Adapter is an Esri-built application. It integrates with your existing web server, and it appropriately directs the network traffic for access. So this might be the most unfamiliar to those of you who have a little experience with web servers. And actually, I can take a poll here. How many here work with web servers regularly or on the basis? Okay. Good group. So for those of you that don't, the Web Adapter is here to make this as simple as possible. What it is it comes in 2 versions, IIS for running on Microsoft IIS and also Java for using Java-based web servers. With the IIS Web Adapter, it will automatically install any of the missing components you need. But for the Java version, you do need an already installed Java-based web server, and that has to be manually installed, and then you apply the Web Adapter on top of that. Chances are if you're using a Java-based web server, you already know this or you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, if you're using Microsoft IIS, it's all handled automatically. Next up is Portal for ArcGIS. So Portal provides that web front end for a user's ArcGIS Enterprise experience, and it's familiar to anybody who's worked with ArcGIS Online. What it does is it gives you the infrastructure backend as well for your Web GIS. So it gives you a rich content management system which users can use to create maps, applications, and web services. You can also use the portal to search, so you can search for any content made available within the Web GIS for use in your maps and apps. You can also add services or content from outside of your organization. So if you have external content from an ArcGIS server, you can add it in as an item and use it in your portal for ArcGIS. You can also use other capabilities such as collaboration or the API, the REST API, to work with your portal there. So next up we have ArcGIS Server. This is something that we like to consider the engine of your ArcGIS Enterprise. It really is something that previous users of server products are likely the most familiar with. It lets you web enable your data and really supports a number of different service types that you can work with. And it also gives you analytical capabilities. So you can take all the data that you're working with in the desktop and publish it online and just have a web version of your GIS content and data served as services. Now, ArcGIS Server does have different licensing roles that you may have heard of. One thing that you should keep in mind is that the GIS server licensing role is what's required for the base ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. We have other licensing roles like image server and geoanalytics and geoevent server, and those provide additional capabilities, but for the base functionality, you just need to worry about the GIS server. Last but not least is the ArcGIS Data Store. Now this is an easy to install and used Esri managed data repository, and it stores any spatial content that's being shared to your portal for ArcGIS. It doesn't require a DBA, and all the administration is handled between server and the data store. So it makes it an easy option for organizations that want to provide feature service capabilities like web editing within their Web GIS if they don't have an enterprise geodatabase. There's 3 different types of ArcGIS data stores: the relational, tile cache, and spatiotemporal. The relational data store is used to store your hosted data like hosted feature layers or the output of spatial analysis tools. The tile cache data store is used for 3D capabilities because it stores your cache data for web scenes. And the spatiotemporal data store is used for archiving real-time data, and it's used primarily with geoevent server and geoanalytics server. So when you're doing the base deployment, you really just need to worry about the relational and the tile cache data store, and the spatiotemporal data store comes into play if you're using those advanced capabilities. We want to make a special note as well that this is not a replacement to your enterprise geodatabases. We get that question a lot with customers saying, you know, we have enterprise geodatabases, do we still need the data store? They are designed to work hand in hand. Your enterprise geodatabases are still usable within ArcGIS Enterprise, and we encourage you to use them. But the data store is there for other workflows, such as, you know, running analysis in the browser, so that you're not storing that data in your enterprise geodatabase. It's going to the data store. So we just went through all those different pieces, and if you are an administrator and you're in charge of installing, you might think, wow, I've got all these pieces, but how do they all work together? What do I do? How do I install it? So this slide will hopefully lay down the groundwork for all the configuration necessary to build that base deployment. So the first thing you're going to want to do is create your portal. So if you've got Portal installed, you run through a wizard to create the portal site. Next, you create the ArcGIS server site. So similarly, you create a site that's used for your server. The next thing you do is you'd register your data store with ArcGIS server, the relational and the tile cache one. Next, you'd register your web adapter for Portal for ArcGIS, and then another web adapter for ArcGIS server. We typically use the name Portal for the Portal one and Server for the server one, but you can actually choose whatever name you want if you're doing a manual install. And then lastly, you federate ArcGIS server with your portal and set it as the hosting server. So if you want to take a picture, I'll leave that up. Now, some of you might be wondering, you know, what is federate and what is hosting server? So we also wanted to take a moment to talk about what those mean. So I'll switch the slides here. So Federation. What Federation does is it integrates the security for your portal and your server. Normally with ArcGIS Server standalone, server has its own user store that you use for security. But when it's federated with Portal, you're using Portal's user store instead to control access. All of your services that are already on ArcGIS Server get added to Portal as items so that you can use them in your portal right away. And then the sharing model is controlled by Portal instead. So with Portal for ArcGIS, as default, you can share your content with either no one, keeping it private, with a group, or with your organization. So you can create specialized groups for members and share your content with just those groups, or everybody who just has a login. Or you can share it with everyone. And that makes it so that everybody who has access to the network that your portal or ArcGIS Enterprise is installed on can see it if they have the URL. So to federate, you go into your portal and you go into the settings and you have a wizard that looks like this one here. You just enter the URL for your ArcGIS server where the services are, and then also the administration URL, which is the internal URL that you'd use to access ArcGIS server. And then you provide the username and the password for the site administrator. And that's something that you set up when you're creating the server site. And once that's all done, it just gets federated and they kind of work together. So next up is the hosting server. So the hosting server is something that hosts the content published by your portal. And what this is a server that has the ArcGIS data store registered to it. So if you have other data stores registered to your server, like enterprise geodatabases, you have registered databases, but it's not actually a hosting server because this server is being used to store hosted feature layers that you share up. You can have all of this on one server as well. So you can have one server that is the hosting server and that is also federated, or you can choose to have the data store on a separate server machine, which is also federated. It can be distributed accordingly. And we have some sessions that will talk about architecting and different patterns that you can choose if you want. Now, what this is needed for is performing any analysis in the portal map viewer, publishing any hosted feature, tile, or scene layers, which you can do from ArcGIS Pro or from ArcMap. It can also be used for batch geocoding, like in a CSV. You can batch geocode the content in there, and also doing things like adding shapefiles to a map or a CSV, which we're going to demo later on. It's also used, I didn't mention it here, but if you have a app like Esri Maps for Office or any of those other plugins, you can connect to your portal and share content from there, and it will go to the hosting server into the data store.
All right, so as Thomas outlined, there's a bunch of steps that we had to go through to set up a full enterprise deployment. Creating the portal, creating the server, and so forth. And if you're not, if you're not really familiar with how these tie together, it could seem a little bit daunting. So new at 10.5.1, we introduced the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder to help with this and ease the setup and deployment of a single machine ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. And it does so by asking the minimum number of questions required to get a deployment up and running. And so for example, on a single machine site, it will install all the software for you, and then you go through a wizard and actually configure the deployment. So federate and create the sites and do all that. I want to outline there are some prerequisites that have to be met. So you have to have HTTP and HTTPS bindings available either in IIS or your Java web server. At least 25 gigabytes of disk space, and sufficient resources to run all the machines, all the components on a single machine. So what I'd like to do is go through a typical installation and configuration of.
Can't see it yet.
Is it a weight screen? Yeah. Okay. That is a duplicate.
There we go. There it goes.
So we're going to go through a typical workflow of using the Enterprise Builder to set up your base deployment. So when you have the Enterprise Builder available to you, it'll come in a certain directory that has the setup files for data store, portal, portal web adapter, and server. It'll have the Builder application, which calls on the setup files to install them, and then a help file. So when you double click on the Builder executable, it'll bring up the Enterprise Builder. And here it's just a UI that goes through the installation of each of of all the components. So click Next. Here you accept the master license agreement. Then you define the destination folder for the installs. This could be the C drive or D drive. It has to be a local drive on the machine. And this is where a portal server and data store will be installed to. Next, you define the account that's going to be used to run portal server and data store, or the enterprise account. This can be a local account or a domain account. And then finally, provide the authorization files for portal and server. And then it gives you the option to just install them. So what's going to happen now is it's going to stage everything, and it's going to go ahead and install portal server, data store, and the web adapters for you. For the out of sake of time, I've already gone through the installation on a separate machine. So once the installation is done, you'll be able to open up the Enterprise Configuration Wizard. And originally it's going to open up in using port 6080 over HTTP. And because we want to do everything over HTTPS, when you click Next, it's going to redirect you to the HTTPS page. Now again, for the sake of time, I've already filled out some of the necessary parameters. So the first thing to do is define the initial administrator account. So this is going to be the account that's first going to be used to administer the portal and the server, and register the data store as well as the web adapters. So you define the credentials for that account, click Next. Then you'll define some more information about that account, first name, last name, email, security question, and answer, and click Next. Then you define the root content directory. So this is going to be where the data and the configuration files for portal server and data store are going to reside. Click Next, and it gives you a summary. So once I click Finish, it's going to go ahead and validate whether I have everything set up correctly. In this case, it is going to make sure that I have the HTTPS binding set up correctly. So I've kind of prepped this to fail, so I'll just simply go ahead and update that binding to make sure that HTTPS is accessible, and then I'll click Finish. So a validation is going to go through. I have HTTPS and HTTP set up for my within IIS, and you see here, these are the steps that's going to go through that normally you would have done yourself. Create the portal, create the ArcGIS, the GIS server site, register the data store with the GIS server, configure the web adapters, and then finally federate GIS server with the portal. And this is all going to happen for you within this configuration wizard. So again, out of the sake of time, I've already gone ahead and created a site using the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder. And when it's done, you can simply click on the link to navigate to the portal home app. So we're going to go ahead and I'll switch it to Thomas so we can cover some things of next steps. So what do you do next as an administrator?
Thanks, John. So we've gone to the URL which the installer has directed us to, which is in our case just called webgis.esri.com. And this is the kind of out-of-the-box homepage that you're going to see. Very basic template of a homepage with a banner and a background that's blank. So what we're going to want to do is probably make it a little bit more personable and personalized for what our purposes are. I'm already signed in here, and you can see there's all these different tabs that I can go to. I'm going to go to the Organization tab, and in here I will use the Edit Settings button to configure my organization further. I just want to point out here that we also do see a member list, so we can see everybody who is currently in our ArcGIS Enterprise, which is right now just me. And we can also see some information about our license, how many members we are able to have, and also when our license will expire. Now, when I go into the Edit Settings page, this gives you a lot of options for administering your ArcGIS Enterprise. So in the General tab, you can do some things like your logo and name, changing your thumbnail, adding a description, giving yourself a summary, the default language, any contact links that are required. You can also do some pretty fun things like set up shared themes so that your organization has a template, so every application made uses the color scheme that you've defined and everything like that. I'm just going to do some very basic customization for now. So in the home page, I'm going to upload a custom image for the background and the banner. Just make sure I can find those. Here we go. Actually going to go into a different folder. Here we go. So I think I'm doing the background first. Yeah. So background, add that in. Then we'll do a banner. Great. So I don't have any content that I want to set up as featured content, but you do have the ability to create a group if there's any maps that you want to really show on your homepage in a carousel. Just going to hit save. Let's just take a look at the homepage now. So now it looks like actually what our machines out on the floor in the showcase look like. But before I do anything else, I also want to show a little bit of other settings in here. So in the servers section, you can actually validate the health of your ArcGIS Enterprise. These were everything that was set up for us. So here are the federated servers. We just have one right now, and it's validating. You can also see what we've set as the hosting server. If we did have a geoanalytics or raster or image server, we could choose those and configure them here from the edit settings page. So that's validating. It's taking a minute. Here we go. So everything looks good. We get the green check. And now here in the utility services, this is one thing that's interesting. You can configure all of the utilities that your ArcGIS Enterprise use. So that includes things like printing, any geometry that you want to do, like geometry calculations, like area, geo-enrichment, and then hydrology and elevation, and these are used for different spatial analysis processes. You can also configure your own directions and routing or geocoding if you have any. But if you also have an ArcGIS Online organization and you want to use those services, like if you don't have any that you've prepared, you can click on this ArcGIS Online tag, and you have the option to check whichever services you want, provide a username and a password for ArcGIS Online, and it will configure that. And when you do configure it, these utility services will update to show URLs once everything's all configured. Optionally too, you have the option to use Living Atlas content, and that's a similar workflow where you would check it, provide your ArcGIS Online organization credentials, and configure. So you'd be using an ArcGIS Online account to access any of those services if you didn't have anything internally, because there is the option to use everything offline and disconnected if you have the services. Not going to focus too much on the other tabs. One thing that might be cool is you can customize your roles, make custom roles. These are the defaults that come in: administrator, publisher, user, and viewer. You can set up collaboration if you want to. We have some other sessions on collaboration which we recommend going to if you want to find out more. And then security settings can be configured if you want to do things like enforce HTTPS only, or maybe prevent members from sharing any content publicly. You can also do some other things like setting up SAML and setting up trusted servers and whatnot. We have a lot of great features that we recommend you take a look at. So now that I've customized my organization a little bit, the next thing would be to add members. So we have this Add Members button, and I'd like to populate my ArcGIS Enterprise with some users. And here you have the option to add built-in members or those for enterprise logins like SAML or other existing enterprise users that you have, like ADFS. And when you click built-in users, you have the option to enter everything one at a time, or you can even use a file. In this case, we actually have a file. It's a CSV of members that we're going to be working with. I have it right here. So I have an email, first name, last name of different people. Myself, which actually I'm already in the organization, so we should change that. And then a person named Satish who will be coming in. So I'm registered to go in as a publisher, and Satish is supposed to be a viewer. Yeah, let's go and change this right now first. So I'm going to add John to the organization. So don't tell John I told you his password. One. Sure. J.Quinn. Sure.
There's a password. There's a password policy for built-in accounts. 8 characters, at least 1 number. So that's something to keep in mind, and it will tell you which accounts didn't honor that password requirement. But
yeah. So we've modified that. We've added John into this file. And let's go ahead and add it in. So I'll do from a file, I'll choose that CSV user list. There we go. So now we see all the edits that I made. John is in here as a publisher. And we also have Satish coming in as a viewer. And now let's go ahead and just add these members. There we go. When we return to the organization page, you can see that John and Satish have been added. And if I wanted to make any changes, like maybe I meant to add John as an administrator instead, that's really easy. I could just click on this dropdown and update it right there. I can also do other administrative tasks like look at what items he has, view what groups he's a member of. I can reset his password, delete him if I want to, or disable him. Now, if I do have any custom roles that I configure, those will also show up in this dropdown. So if I made a custom role for, say, a contractor or something like that, I can do that easily here from within the user interface. So before I stop here, I also wanted to show you the portal administrator directory. So to get there, here is a tab. You'd effectively go through your portal web adapter and go to /portal-admin. Now this is a directory that a lot of the administrative tasks are available in the portal website, so in the edit settings page I showed you. But there are a couple of things that you might be coming to this website for, and those are largely logs, looking at your logs for portal, and also some security settings. So if you wanted to do things like upload a new SSL certificate or do things like that, you can use the portal administrator directory to do all of that. And if you have any questions about that, just let us know.
Great. All right. Thanks, Tom. So let's jump back. Okay, so again, we've gone through set up our single machine site. We've gone through some of these different URLs like the portal home app, portal admin. The services URL is going to be available through server/rest and server manager. Any administrative tasks you want to go through for the server, you can reach the manager page through either 6443/ArcGIS manager. So quick recap, we went through customizing the home page, updating the banner in the background. There's some other customizations you can make, like, making sure that featured content that you want immediately accessible for your users is immediately there in a carousel. You can update the behavior of the portal by configuring utility services. For example, you want a custom printing service, geocoding, or routing service. And you can customize the behavior within the web map viewer. This could be defining a custom base map group. You want to add some of your own base maps to the base map switcher that's available for the map viewer. You can go ahead and do so. And there's a lot of other customizations that you can make for your portal website and the ArcGIS Enterprise that are pretty well documented within our resource center. In terms of further administration of your ArcGIS Enterprise, we went through some workflows of adding members. In our case, we added built-in members, but you can add enterprise members as well, either one at a time or in bulk using a CSV. And we talked about the portal admin directory, which is going to be important for managing security and SSL certificates, as well as taking a look at the portal logs to identify any issues that have to be resolved. So now that we've added some users to our portal, we have customized the look and feel to how we want our organization to look. We can now begin to connect to the portal. And there's going to be two different ways that you're going to be able to connect to the portal. One is through the home app. And this is through portal/home to get you to the home application. Another is through how clients are going to connect to the portal. And this is going to be through the same URL but without /home at the end. And this is going to be for clients such as ArcGIS Pro, ArcMap, any mobile clients like Collector or Explorer, or any of the location analytics applications like ArcGIS Maps for Office. So real quick, I'm going to assume the role of a user and go through a typical workflow that your users may go through. Yes, I do. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and sign out from this tab. I'm going to sign in with the account that Thomas has created for me. Now again, I'm signed in as an administrator, so I can go ahead and go to the map viewer. And what I'm going to do is, again, just a typical workflow that someone may go through. I have a file of a CSV file that contains some latitude and longitude coordinates for points, cities within. Okay, so instead of the CSV, I'm going to use a zip shapefile. It's another way that you can add content directly to the map viewer. And I'll go ahead and browse that zip shapefile, and I'll go ahead and import the layer. And as you can see, it automatically adds to the map. It gives me the option for modifying the symbology using smart mapping, so I can customize the the symbology and how it looks. And this is a great way to simply verify that your ArcGIS Enterprise is set up correctly. As we mentioned in one of the bullets of what you get if you actually enable or register a hosting server, is adding a shapefile to the web map. So because this went through successfully, it's a good way to verify, just a sanity check, that this deployment is set up correctly. So jump back to. All right, so now what I want to talk about is what's new at 10.6. And this is in terms of being able to upgrade and using some of the command line utilities. Since we offered the Enterprise Builder at 10.5.1, we want to make sure that it's upgradable to 10.6 version. So starting at 10.6, you're able to upgrade environments that were created at 10.5.1. And normally, if you want to upgrade an ArcGIS Enterprise deployment, you'll install the software yourself, and you'll go through the upgrade process of each individual component manually. But just like installing a new deployment, you have this easy one-click experience to upgrade your environment to 10.6. So I'm going to go through that real quick. So when you have the builder available for you, it'll come in the same directory. You've got setup files for 10.6. Sorry, I'll add that 10.5.1 is on this machine. I've already installed and configured it using the Enterprise Builder. But I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You'd think I would learn one of these times. So there we go. So on this machine, I've already installed 10.5.1. I've already configured the site using Enterprise Builder, and now I can go ahead and run the installer to essentially upgrade the individual components to 10.6. So the install process is very similar to installing fresh. I can accept the master agreement. And because I already have the Enterprise Builder installed here, it picks up that there is already a destination folder for the install location. I'll click Next. Similarly, it knows that because I have the Enterprise Builder installed here, it picks up that there is already an Enterprise account that's going to be used to configure the components and used to run Portal Server and Data Store. I'll choose the new license file for 10.6, and then go ahead and install. This definitely will take longer than installing fresh because it has to uninstall the previous component and then install the new components. But again, it's just something that you don't have to do manually now. It'll go ahead and uninstall Portal Server, Data Store, and the web adapters, and then install them at 10.6. So once the install is complete, you have this. You reach the Enterprise Configuration Wizard again at 6080. And then once you click Next, it'll redirect you to HTTPS. And once the configuration wizard loads again, you have this simple upgrade option to get everything to 10.6. And again, it's just this one click that'll get everything to the latest version. It'll validate that HTTPS and HTTP are available. It'll upgrade the portal, upgrade the GIS server site, upgrade the data store, configure the web adapters, and then you have an upgraded environment to 10.6. So it's a lot easier to get your environment from a previous version to the latest version. So next I want to talk about some of the command line utilities that were also added at 10.6. So the first is installing a base deployment. And the usage of this is just to call on the builder executable file and then provide some of the parameters necessary to install the software, such as where you want to install the software to. So see program files, ArcGIS, for example. The GIS username and password. So the account that you're going to use, the enterprise account that's going to be used to run portal, server, and data store. And then the authorization files for portal and for server. And this also serves as the upgrade utility as well. So before you actually configure everything, you can use the install to uninstall 10.5.1 and then install 10.6. Once you've installed the software using the Enterprise Builder and command line utility, you can use the configure-based deployment utility to configure everything. And here, you're providing the same credentials and information required within the UI, within the configuration wizard, such as account information, first name, last name, username, security question. In the event that you're using a Java web server for the web adapters, you'll provide the URL to the Java web server for the server web adapter and the portal web adapter. You define the content directory, so that root content directory that's going to store the portal, server, and data store configuration files. And then finally, no, not finally, you can have a properties file that has all this information in it, so you can easily point to it to configure the site. And finally, upgrades, again, very simple, just like the UI was, is a simple switch of that you want to perform a silent upgrade. And this is going to be run after you run the install to upgrade everything to the latest version. I want to go through some quick tips and tricks for the Enterprise Builder, things that are important for you to be aware of. The first is it's important that you don't uninstall or reinstall any of the components manually. When you install everything with the Enterprise Builder, there's a linkage that's established between the components and the fact that they were installed with the Enterprise Builder. If you uninstall anything manually or reinstall anything, then that linkage is broken, and the Enterprise Builder won't be able to either upgrade everything or configure everything. Along that same vein, you can only upgrade ArcGIS Enterprise Builder deployments. So if you have used the Enterprise Builder to install everything at 10.5.1, you can use the Enterprise Builder to upgrade to 10.6 or future releases. If you have, let's say, set up an environment yourself at a previous version from 10.5.1 or at 10.5.1, you installed and configured everything yourself, unfortunately you can't upgrade that to 10.6 using the Enterprise Builder. And next, there's a patch notification tool that's going to be important for you to run to get any available patches, security patches, or any functional patches for portal, server, and data store. And it's also important that you run a security scan to give you an idea of how you can harden your environment in terms of security. So the Resource Center is a great way to read up on the Enterprise Builder and ArcGIS Enterprise itself. There's a topic specifically about building your first ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. And there's also a number of other subjects that will help you through administration of your ArcGIS Enterprise. Pro licensing, configuring or importing SSL certificates, as well as upgrading. Technical support is a great resource to reach out to if there's any issues or any problems you run into. And also, obviously we're here at the showcase, so feel free to come by and talk with us about your experiences using the builder or any issues or questions that you have. Here's some other sessions that may be helpful for you. The first is Web GIS, a crash course. This, at a high level, describes ArcGIS Enterprise as well as ArcGIS Online and what those different platforms will give you and your organization. Next, Thomas mentioned this briefly, but there's a session on ArcGIS Enterprise, Architecting Your Deployment. So it goes through some different architecture scenarios. For our presentation, obviously, we went through the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder, which sets up everything on a single machine site. But you may be interested in distribution of resources or something to that effect. So that's going to be a good session that you can attend. Next, administration of ArcGIS Enterprise. Thomas is giving this as the coworker. And it goes into a little bit more information about what you can do within the home app and the ArcGIS Enterprise to customize it in terms of setting up utility services and customizing the homepage. So if you want a little bit more information about that, that's a good session to attend. Finally, there's always new functionality that we're all excited about. So what's new in ArcGIS Enterprise is a good session for you to attend to get a sense of what's new in 10.6. And finally, please take our survey. We want to know what works well, what doesn't work well with this session, how we can improve. Please take our survey and let us know your thoughts. And with that, we'll take some questions if anybody has any.
With enterprise users, right? If a new user is added automatically to the enterprise login, is it registered by default as a viewer in a basic group?
It's a good question. So with configuring your ArcGIS Enterprise to use enterprise user, like from Active Directory, there is an option to enable automatic account creation, which means that when a user that doesn't have a login to the enterprise connects to the enterprise, they provide their credentials, they're automatically added as users within or added as a named user within the organization. Now within that setting, there's also the ability to set what role that user will have. So you can set it as a viewer, publisher, probably don't want to do administrator, but there is the option to define what role and level that user will be.
Any other questions? Yeah. Hey.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a common question we get because people have these ArcGIS servers that have been running for a while, and now they want to move to ArcGIS Enterprise. Well, they have all these services that are published. How do they move? And that's a good question, and I think that it's dependent on what you see that existing server, what role you want that server to take. So a pretty common thing that you can do, and it's fairly straightforward, is that you leave that as your ArcGIS server. You have another machine that you set up and use the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder to set it up. You have your portal server and data store on that machine. That server on that machine is the hosting server, so it has a specific role of being the hosting server. And then you simply just add that other server as a federated server, so that you'll have, again, it's just kind of distribution of responsibilities. You maintain this as your traditional ArcGIS server. It is federated, so you do get the ability to have this single sign-on and this shared security model for your portal. But you do have the option to have just a dedicated hosting server. So that's an option you can take. Yeah, it will require another license because you have two kind of active ArcGIS servers that are running. And that's a good question. So if you do kind of want to reuse that existing server as your hosting server, you're probably better off just installing software manually and then configuring it, because the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder won't be able to kind of integrate, even if you run it on that machine, it's not going to be able to integrate your existing site and the existing services within the ArcGIS Enterprise.
Sorry. Yeah, back there.
Can you explain the level 1 versus level 2 users and ArcGIS Online versus Portal? Are they interchangeable?
Sure, I can do that. So the question was explaining the difference between the level 1 and level 2 users and viewers, and whether they're interchangeable between ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. So your usernames in ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise are separate entities. So if you have a level 2 user in ArcGIS Online, you're not able to use that username in your ArcGIS Enterprise. You could use the same username and the same password and kind of mimic it, but really they're separate user credentials and separate sort of security stores. As for the difference between the two, we think of the level 1 viewer account as a read-only type of member. So people who have a level 1 viewer account, when they log into ArcGIS Enterprise, they're only going to see what is available to them. They can browse and they can view the content that is shared or available to the organization or to everyone. Well, everybody can view, it's viewed to everyone, but if you had content that was just shared to your organization and you had a need for people to view those, but they didn't really need to do any editing or any kind of a work with the services, they'd be appropriate for a level 1. It's essentially just a read-only account. They can read, they can look at the maps, but they can't engage with it any further. Level 2 account, you can do a lot more with that. You have the ability to use one of our out-of-the-box roles. You can configure a user. Now, the difference between a level 2 user and a level 1 viewer is that the level 2 user account does have some extra capabilities. They can do editing, for example. So if there's any editable services, they can take advantage of that. They can do editing. But you also have the ability to make a custom role that does everything that you want those users to do. That would be level 2. With level 2, you can create custom roles. With level 1, it's a little bit more just, this user is used just to view everything, no further engagement. So that might be helpful if you, want to add people into your organization just to engage with it just visually. You don't need any kind of disconnected editing or any other editing capabilities. I hope that answers your question. And you had a question, sir?
Yeah, public access to the portal. Web adapter still act as a proxy to it as well?
Yeah, so the question was on public access to the portal. So your web adapter does act as a reverse proxy of sorts to your enterprise. So when you share content in your ArcGIS Enterprise to everyone, that's really everybody who has access to that web adapter URL. So you can have a domain that only people within your organization can view, and when you share something to everyone, it's just everyone within that domain. If your web adapter is open to the open internet and then you share with everyone, it will be on the internet. Yep, question?
My organization has certain architectural guidelines and all that. We've been having trouble with them because these products are anti-vendors. So they are insisting that we use role-based authorization at the application level and layer 7 for access to services. Do you all have any support for layer 7?
Layer 7.
In terms of load balancing and kind of.
No, this is for authentication.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you can maybe stop by the Enterprise Island and we can get you somebody to answer that question for you.
Sorry. Hi, yes, sir.
So we have my company, we're using ArcGIS Online right now. We have our own, my company does that with ArcGIS Enterprise. Is that data, is it migrated to Enterprise or how does that all work?
Right, that's a good question. So the question was, we have an ArcGIS Online organization. Does that data get kind of migrated to ArcGIS Enterprise? There isn't a migration tool per se that Esri provides. I know that there are kind of third-party products that will do some kind of migration, I think, that are offered. But we also have the ability to do something like collaboration, where if there is any content in your ArcGIS Online that you want to have available in Enterprise, you can set up a collaboration between those two so that your data is kind of, at a set schedule, syncing between the two organizations. So in that case, if you did have data in ArcGIS Online that was regularly updated and you needed to consume it in Enterprise, you can set up a collaboration and any edits done in ArcGIS Online will be viewed in Enterprise and updated. But we don't really have a built-in migration tool to kind of migrate your services from online to Enterprise. You would be able to, with online, export your services and then republish them if that was something that you wanted to do. There is the export capability of content there, but I'm not sure about maps and applications that are configured. Yeah, that might require kind of a special tool or other workflow.
There is, if you're familiar with Python and the Python API, there is samples available to clone data and maps and users and groups between between organizations, either if that's online to ArcGIS Enterprise, online to online, enterprise to enterprise. So that is an option that you can use to migrate users and content between these organizations.
The Python API would be a good way to go. Yes, question?
Saying that the web server is mostly pre-installed before you run the enterprise builder, correct?
For a Java web server, yes. If you have Microsoft IIS, like if you're installing it on Microsoft, in the installation it will install the missing IIS components that are necessary.
Yeah, and keep in mind that they would only do HTTP binding, so then you have to go in with your own SSL certificate and set up the HTTPS binding manually.
So there are no other Windows components that will be required, or the builder will install them automatically?
Nope, it's just the only component that is required for the enterprise builder that is not our stuff is IIS, and we will set that up for you.
Any other questions? Hi, sir. So the question is, does it install GeoEvent Server or any other extensions? No, it's designed to set up your base ArcGIS Enterprise deployment, the kind of vanilla, just the federated server the hosting server with a registered relational and tile cache data store. After that, you can authorize your ArcGIS server with additional licenses, geoanalytics or image analysis or any of the other extensions, as well as install GeoEvent if that's what you need to do. Yeah, those will be done separately after Enterprise Builder is installed. Yes?
If you do that, will you be able to use the upgrade tool?
Yes, you will still. So the question is, if you go ahead and you kind of extend your enterprise deployment a bit, install GeoEvent, authorize different licenses, you will still be able to upgrade, because the main components have been installed with the enterprise builder, and that's really all the enterprise builder cares about in upgrading. You'll have to upgrade GeoEvent yourself, as well as reauthorize the server with the additional licenses that you have previously authorized it with for 10.6 and on.
Yeah.
So we went from a 10.1 to 10.4. We just finished that upgrade. And I think there was some talk from the last time I was here about 10.5 and concurrent users and licensing. So we didn't go to 10.5. But I guess I need to find out more about that if there's been any changes.
Yeah, so I think you can definitely stop by the Enterprise Island and talk with the licensing team about how that's progressed. I know there was big changes, and this kind of goes back to the gentleman's question over there about level 1 users and the viewer role. So that's a good question to ask the licensing team and kind of get that squared away.
Okay, so if we're staying at 10.4, what happened to that math portal? I'll just ask a question and I turn back up. Can we do that, or do we have to start with a fresh federated server?
So if you have an existing server and you want to move to this ArcGIS Enterprise, you would install everything yourself. So the additional components you need: portal, the data store, and another web adapter. I assume you already have a web adapter for your existing server. And then you would have to federate yourself and then designate that federated server as your hosting server.
Could we still publish services like
Yep.
Yes.
So the ArcGIS server will still act as your traditional GIS server, with the additional functionalities available to it as the hosting server, such as publishing directly from Esri Maps for Office, or publishing directly from my content, zip shapefiles, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you can do all the old workflows, it just adds extra.
everything has to be done right?
Right. Yes.
If you already have the server and you need to add everything else, yeah. Yes, sir. Can users still publish to ArcGIS server after federation? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, you can still publish to ArcGIS server from ArcMap after it's been federated.
The only thing to keep in mind is that now that Portal will control the security, you may have pre-existing GIS server tier logins that you have. You have set up within Manager, you have roles and users. When you federate, that's actually all passed over. Portal will control the security, so you're not really going to use any of those GIS tier security, the logins anymore. Any of the named users within Portal will be able to, sign in within ArcMap and be able to publish services.
Yeah.
So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, you'd have to change the credentials
Right.
to be the Portal ones, but otherwise the workflow would be the same. Great. Any other questions?
All right.
No? Thank you.
Thanks.
You guys offer like an SOIs on the portal, so you can have row level data access.
No, that'd still be implemented in, so the question was, can you use SOIs in the portal, which are server object interceptors? Those are still going to be implemented on the server end, because even though Portal's controlling security, server's still going to be handling, the actual GIS server and the services and that sort of thing. So you would still implement your SOI within the ArcGIS server. So that really is not going to be changed by, the fact of federation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Yes. So the question was, when you want to upgrade from a previous version to the latest version, or whatever version you're going to get to, you had to uninstall and reinstall the web adapters and then reconfigure them. That's actually still happening behind the scenes using ArcGIS Enterprise Builder. So it does uninstall the web adapter, reinstall it, and then reconfigure it for you.
Yeah.
So it is still the case.
Yeah. If you're doing a manual upgrade, you would still you'd uninstall the previous version and install the new one on top.
All right, well, thank you. Again, we're available at the showcase. If anything comes up, you have any questions, we're available till Thursday, so feel free to stop by with any questions.
Thank you very much.
Hi.
Thank you.